Charles Myssy, welcome to the show.
Egan, great to be here, brother.
So what is a shadow?
The shadow is a metaphorical word used to describe the unseen parts of us. So there are many parts of us that we're consciously aware of, but there are parts of us that we're not consciously aware of. And that's what we describe the shadow as. So the shadow, it often gets formed in our early developmental years when we're getting an understanding of what's worthy and unworthy, good enough and not good enough about ourselves. And all that material about all this, all these parts of us that we then, as a result of the experiences that we have growing up, we then cast them into the shadow and it becomes unconscious material. So, for example, someone who was raised in a home where anger wasn't appropriate, every time that they experienced a surge in anger in their body, they would be shut down, they would be judged, love would be withheld from them. So from that point, the individual, as a way to protect themselves to feel loved and accepted in that environment, can suppress their anger, and then their angry side then gets, becomes unconscious material, and they can spend their whole life thinking that they're a nice person, they're a good person, and a polite person, and I don't get angry, and anger is a dangerous emotion, and say yes all the time, agree, never disagree. And as a result of that, they can then, live quite a disempowered life because that shadow hasn't been integrated. That anger hasn't been integrated in their life. They live life without any boundaries, saying yes all the time. They may become exhausted. There's a lot of anger being suppressed in their body, which can lead to a lot of health issues. And that's just an example and a brief description of what the shadow is.
So how is the shadow such a master at hiding itself?
Because it's all based on protection. So the psyche is very intelligent in the way that we create outcomes for us to survive and increase our chances of survival. And it's so good at keeping us in a state of protection that it even hides itself from our own conscious awareness. Because if we are consciously aware of this unconscious material, there's a higher chance that we have to express it, to actualize it, to put it out there in the world. So it even hides itself from us, from our own conscious awareness, to prevent it from being seen. Because it learned at some point in time in life that its desire, its expression, its belief, its essence is inherently unworthy or not good enough. So it's part of the mechanism of protection to hide. That's why it's so good at hiding, for our own survival. So I guess you could say that the people that were better at hiding their shadow throughout history were the ones that were able to survive the best, because we lived for so long in small hunter-gatherer tribes ranging from about 200 people. So whatever was unworthy or not good enough, depending on whatever the social makeup was in the tribe at that time and the culture, if it was to be expressed at that time in the culture, maybe it was seen as blasphemy, or you were seen as a heretic or a witch, or you were seen, there was a lot of superstition in the culture of your tribe, or perhaps there was some type of sexual rules and regulations within that tribe that you could not cross. If you were to express any of these parts of you within that tribe, there's a higher chance of you being outcasted. And if you're outcasted, well, then there's a higher chance of you just dying, not surviving. So it became part of our inner protective software to become masterful revealers of this stuff.
Yeah, I find evolutionary psychology super fascinating, and how the brain operates as well. Like, it literally is designed to survive. So it doesn't care if its survival comes at the expense of your fulfillment, your enjoyment. If you have to go through toxic relationships, a job you hate, like it simply doesn't care. It'll try and convince you that it is the right thing to do simply because it's more predictable for the brain. And as long as you're surviving, well, then it's doing its job, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the brain, or these parts of us, these parts of the psyche, it doesn't know now that it's safe for a man, let's say, to embody and express more range within his sexuality. It could be towards a member of the same sex, uh, or a woman that she may not know that it's appropriate for her to have sovereignty and independence now and say no, and she doesn't need to be dependent on a man and do what the family says and uphold some patriarchal system. For a lot of people that are still very much stuck in that type of programming, where let's say you have a man who has a lot of sexual shame, or a woman who's a good girl and just says yes, and who's overly submissive, you could say that they're very much enmeshed with those parts of them that have been built throughout time, to survive those previous cultures, and times where those parts of us, it was not safe to embody them, and in some places it still isn't safe to embody that.
So, what do you think the greatest costs are of not investing into this quote unquote inner work and trying to actually integrate all of these parts that we've exiled?
So the greatest cost. One of the main regrets. So Bonnie Ware, who's a palliative care nurse, she supported people through their death, and she wrote a book. And one of the biggest regrets that people had on their deathbed was not living a life that was true to themselves, but a life that they thought would be more suitable for other people. So that's the biggest regret that people have in their deathbed. So the cost is that you live an inauthentic life. You spend life wearing these masks, hiding and continuing to suppress your shadow, even in a world where it's safe for these parts, this unconscious material, to come out and express itself. And when I say safe, I don't mean it's fully safe, because a fully safe world doesn't exist, but it's safe for you to embody those parts of you and push against whatever cultural, societal, religious, family system norms that are currently still present now, to reshape the current normal expression of what it means to be a person in today's day and age. So I believe it is safe enough to do that. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get judged. There's not going to be pushback, and there isn't going to be people rejecting you, and you may not, you'll lose friends. But there is an opportunity for people to do that now, so that they don't have to suffer from the cost of living an inauthentic life. And there's just like detrimental health impacts as well. Suppressed emotion increases the likelihood of I think it's a 34% chance of increased early death. So just from all the autoimmune issues and health issues and addictions and coping mechanisms and relationship issues that we can suffer from continuing to suppress our true authentic selves. So I'd say there's a pretty big cost, in so many areas of life.
What's the easiest way that someone can tell that they're being inauthentic?
Or it's going to look differently for everyone. The way that inauthenticity manifests, it could be saying yes when your whole body is actually saying no. It could be working, in a job and doing what your family told you to do. Kind of following whatever family expectation there is, and you continuing to stay loyal to that. It could be, I mean, what's how do you know when you're being inauthentic? What's an example that you would give for yourself personally?
I would say when I would say tuning into the body is a good system for me. I feel like when it feels really like there's a lot of ecstasy and it's sort of like a fantasy that I've created, and I feel like I'm making decisions based on more of my ego versus when something feels more in the heart space. And I think that's a difficult thing to do in the moment, because the ego is very good at convincing you that it is the right thing. There's so much certainty with the emotions, the dopamine spike. And it's really actually hard in the moment to know. I feel like when I reflect back on decisions, I can actually tell really easy, like, oh yeah, I can reflect on, be like, yeah, that was quite, I know why I did that thing when I create a space to reflect. But in the moment, it's very difficult to delineate between, is this, an unconscious part of me trying to seek approval or seek a voice, or is this really an expression of my truth? Like I do find it difficult to tell in the moment. And I think it's really hard, but I think reflection is probably the greatest gateway for me.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of an understanding of when you're being inauthentic is going to come up from reflection. And I think with that, it gives people permission to fail, to be judged, to make mistakes, rather than trying to preempt when they will be inauthentic and prevent themselves from doing it. Because then I think we're just getting so in our heads, but rather
Mm.
just reflecting on a decision you made, or when you said yes, when you really, it would have been more wise for you to say no, or being able to tune into your body and see if a boundary was being crossed and you didn't express anything and you shut down and you acted like everything was okay. Or when you were having a challenging conversation and your instinctual response at that time was to stonewall or to get angry and project, instead of actually just listening and taking on some criticism and taking accountability for anything there that you may have done, and taking some necessary steps forward for you to work on that. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different examples of how someone can be inauthentic, and yeah, it really depends on the person. Yeah, what's aligned with them, and what isn't. That's the life that they're building for themselves.
A lot of people say that, I've done the work. What's one of the clearest signs someone absolutely hasn't done the work?
One of the clearest signs that someone hasn't done the work is they don't take accountability. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things. Yeah, when there's a clear expression of some type of dysfunctional or disempowering behavior that they have, and they have an inability to see that or reflect on it and take accountability for it. Like they're just in denial, they're defensive, they deflect. um, I'd say that's one really clear example that someone hasn't done the work. Inability to take ownership and responsibility for their own disempowering or dysfunctional behavior, and just own it and just be like, yeah, cool, like I have that, without getting defensive or deflecting or trying to point a finger at you or blame shifting or anything like that. I think that's a clear sign. It's not someone that's perfect and fully healed and floating on a rock and doing yoga symbols. It's just someone that can take accountability, for themselves when their shit comes up.
How does your own personal journey map onto the coaching work that you do? And how's that sort of whole process been of, teaching, coaching people these things, and then also having your own stuff to work through over the years?
So can you ask, so how does my own personal stuff impact how I coach people?
Yeah, well, I guess like when you start coaching, right, and you're doing this stuff, there's sort of a pressure to be good at what you do, because it's the same as an accountant being good at their own, like an accountant being good with money, or a personal trainer being in good shape. Someone who's a coach and does inner work, there's sort of the same thing. There's an expectation that you are quote unquote healed. You've done this inner work. So how is your own personal journey with yourself sort of mapped onto your coaching work?
I mean, I don't put that expectation on myself or that pressure on myself to be some fully healed coach, in order for me to do my work. So I don't have that there, first of all, in an unhealthy sense, that it could be coming from a place where it's just like an irreachable place to satisfy some insecurity I have for an imposter syndrome. Like I think every single person in any industry is going to have that. And coaching work, there can be such a overly high expectation when it comes like to that. So yeah, I think I've just been able to give myself permission to have my own triggers, to have my own stuff that I work through in my own time, and that's very separate to the work that I do with other people. It's not directly correlated in a way where I can't have any type of wounds or things that I'm working with in order to help people. Um, yeah, am I answering your question, bro? Is that sort of what you're asking me?
Yeah, I just think it's super interesting because I think the biggest struggle that people have is like the expectations, the pressures they put on themselves to show up in this perfect way. So,
Yeah.
as someone who's like, doing a lot of this work, it's interesting to see what your evolution has been
Mm.
to get to the place where you are today.
Yeah. 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 Cool, man. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. If you want me to get a bit more detail into that, bro, feel free.
What do you think have been some of the biggest catalysts for your journey? Like, what have been some of the big dominoes that have fallen in your life to give you the biggest changes?
Biggest dominoes to give me biggest changes. Yeah, being the man of the house at 8 years old, that was a pretty big one. So becoming the parentified child and needing to be the masculine protector of a household with four women in it, and growing up in housing commission, government housing. Yeah, I think that really gave me a deep perspective of what the feminine goes through. My sisters and my mother, they're very attractive women, so I had experience of seeing a lot of creepy men catcalling them and approaching them, and really got an understanding of how unsafe women feel in this world. Um, Also, growing up in housing commission, bro, and lower socioeconomic, like having a lower socioeconomic status in Australia, that taught me a lot about just growing up in an underprivileged, yeah, what it feels like to grow up with scarcity and financial stress and living week to week and not feeling safe in that, and how resourceful you can actually be, like with what's around you, to make use of that to create better outcomes for yourself. So that really influenced my perspective on, yeah, privilege, and how there are different levels of privileges, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how like I was really unable to tap into my conscious skills and creativity and um, spirituality when I'm just stressed out thinking about money. So that was one of the first things I really had to get out of growing up. So that really shapes a lot of my understanding on like collective and systemic issues that people face, and it helps me see through a lot of spiritual bypassing bullshit that you can just sort of manifest the money you want, and all you got to do is um, ask for it. And some of these manifestation coaches are sort of baloney that they're blowing up people's asses. That there's some truth to it, but I think a lot of it is just quite ungrounded and impractical with real world
Yeah, take me into that. I love.
issues.
That's super interesting.
What do you want to know?
Well, with the manifestation thing, there's this massive, you know, movement online, right? Like just almost toxic positivity, manifest everything, which sometimes it seems so far fetched from reality. So, what is your opinion on manifestation?
What's my opinion? I mean, I'm not against manifestation. I pray for things. I had only two choices with where I was at personally in the circumstances that I was in, and it's either you can just continue to spend your life as a victim to your circumstance and remain in this state of where you're at now and not do anything with it. So I credit a lot of essentially the mentality I had to get myself into so I could put myself in a better outcome to make more money for myself. But a lot of that happened like through direct action, along with affirming a belief and believing that it was possible, and um, thinking to myself and believing like, yes, you can make money, you can be successful. But there was so much action that I had to take along with that. So many risks I had to take, so many edges I had to lean into, so many times I had to be courageous, so many um, along with that. So, I mean, look, I personally haven't done any of this manifestation type work, so I haven't experienced it personally. So I don't know, like, if maybe there's something that's really good about it that I just don't know, that I haven't tapped into personally. But um, from an outside perspective, and from just working with people that have been through a lot of those types of programs, yeah, it just I don't know. I just think there's a lot of bullshit in it, man. I don't know.
Mm.
There's a lot of crap there along with it. It's like that's just what my gut sort of tells me. Yeah.
How do you navigate personally this like tension to peel back the inner layers? Like I've always found it super difficult to know, what is worth just peeling back the layers, what is my true self versus just affirming action, creating a new identity, a new version of myself. Like there seems to be this real tension between, do I just need to figure out the part of me that's sabotaging or wants this, or do I just take new action, and if I instill enough repetitions into myself, then I'll be this new version?
Yeah, I think both can coexist. So for some people, having that moment of breakthrough where they're able to connect to that part of them that is sabotaging and understand in a really deep level where that part of them stems from and how, let's say, it's a younger part of them that's trying to protect them in some way that originates from their childhood and protecting them from failing or just addicted to chaos and drama. And whenever things get good, will start to feel safe in the nervous system. It feels unfamiliar. So then it resorts to some insert whatever self sabotage behavior as a way to gain some sort of sense of familiarity. Like for a lot of people, just getting that insight can be a really powerful way from there to support them in taking action because now they have a deeper understanding of the underpinnings of why they have a self sabotage pattern that's looping, and their relationship with it can shift and change from that point because the common relationship that we have with a part of us that is in so much dichotomy to how we want to operate from, let's say, our higher self or this new identity that we want to create is to shame it and inflict a lot of harsh punishment on it, which is understandable. That's just our way to try and manage some sort of behavior that's not serving us. But I think for a lot of people, having that insight, and I know it was for me, it was just really sort of affirming like, oh shit, like this pattern isn't actually me. It's like some program that I picked up along the way in my life as a way to feel safe or feel seen or, insert whatever need it is. And I think when people can make that connection and start to differentiate from it, and that's only just one part of gaining awareness, it can already influence so much more growth and change from that point of awareness. But then there's also there's an emotional charge that creates these sort of programs to operate in whatever way it is. So there's a lot of deep somatic healing work that can actually happen from that point of awareness with that part that's in, let's say, sabotages with procrastination. But the way that the procrastination manifests is through some sort of a freeze response. And through actually somatically grounding that part into feeling more safe, there's an unburdening that occurs, and then there's an opportunity for that energy that was being used to keep your body stuck to be expressed towards something creative, or could be a goal that you have. So I mean, it's super exhausting for people to be running these sort of self-sabotage patterns. There's so many layers to it. You have, first of all, the self-sabotage actual behavior that uses up a shitload of energy, depending on what it is. I mean, if it's going out on a bender, that's massive amounts of energy that's been spent doing that, and the amount of energy it takes to recover from that. And then let's say the amount of finances that you spent on that bender, that was a lot of energy that was expended that now you have to work again to regain, to get ahead. Then there's the shame and the guilt and the shit that you feel about yourself afterwards. That uses up a lot of energy doing that as well. So there's a lot of energy, let's say, that gets spent in that self-sabotage pattern that once it's may not be fully unburdened, but as you're going through that unburdening process, all that energy that was being spent towards that can actually be spent towards something a lot more enriching, like you just said, to just take action. So I think both can exist, but the shadow side of just sort of taking action, there's a shadow side to that too. It's maybe I can just out action my trauma, out action my shit, And there's a lot of people that do that too. I know, I've done that before, and it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I went through a breakup once, and I didn't know how to deal with the grief, and the way that I dealt with it was just work like a dog and train like an animal. And the outcome was that I was jacked, I was strong, I saved up like $100,000 that I then used to go and start traveling around the world, and I don't regret any of that. But after that, I was single for 8 years because I didn't process any of the grief. And the outcome after that was that I had a part of me in fear of opening up my heart and connecting again because of how hurtful that experience was. So there was still an element of inner work that I eventually had to do at some other point in time to heal from that grief. So then I could open myself up to love and connect with my heart in that way. So it's important to honor both.
Interesting one here. So when we're like growing up, obviously we all these beliefs, we absorb all of these beliefs from like 0 to 7, and then we go through life and we have these experiences, and then we start, we're believing this is who we are, and then we maybe go through an awakening process, and we start to peel back the layers. If we find our truth, like if we get really close to who we actually are, and then we have these big domino events in our life, is a similar process going to occur where there's the ego is going to try and put on another mask, or do you think once we've actually gotten to our truth, then there's such a high level of awareness that we're going to be okay? Or is it going to be a continual series of like the ego is going to continually try to put on new masks, deploy itself, and we have to constantly be, fighting against the ego to figure out who we actually are?
Yeah, I don't see it like that. So I see individuation, which is just becoming who you are, as a lifelong process. So that's just a lifelong process. Now, the ego always has a role in that. So the purpose of the ego is to create a boundary between the inner and the outer world. So the inner world is full of all the unconscious material, the collective shadow, the collective unconscious, an immense amount of symbolism and myth stories and dreamlike states. And um, there's a lot of content in the inner world. And in the outer world, it's the outer world in which we relate to, the material world. So the ego creates a boundary between those two different dimensions. And the danger, you could say, or the shadow side of ego death, complete ego death, is now you're in a state where you don't know how to relate your inner world to the outer world. So just like the basic fundamental principles of identity, of who I am and why I'm here. Okay. And that story changes throughout life as we step into different initiations. For example, my reasoning for who I am and why I'm here as an adolescent is going to be very different to an adult, is going to be very different to a father, it's going to be very different to an elder. And as I go through all these different initiations, through these rites of passage and these comings of age, who I am and why I'm here changes over time. But that boundary between the inner world and outer world, the identity, the ego, still remains. And the reason why it's important is because without that there, even just the basic principle understandings of who I am and why I'm here, the inner world starts to blend with the outer world. It becomes blurry. And we can describe, and a lot of people that do a lot of spiritual work or take a lot of drugs or get into a lot of mind altered states, they can experience, forms of psychosis, uh, whether it be, induced in any of those, formats, um, or just such an ego dissolution that they don't know how to answer that question. They don't know who they are, why they're here. You may see that in some spiritual types where they live in a state where those two questions are unanswered and they don't need to be answered. And hey, if that's how you want to live, that's okay. I'm not here to judge that. That may be the fully enlightened state. To me, I don't see it that way. I see that throughout our, that you said that we go through these experiences in life that create this domino effect, and then it can really challenge our identity at that time. I see that as a period of time to go through an initiation. So, for example, a man to a father, he's going through an initiation there. The moment when his partner is pregnant, he's going to be going, that's going to bring up, it may bring up a lot of stuff for him, like a sense of freedom. Oh my God, now I can't just do whatever I want anymore. Like my whole sense of sovereignty is being challenged. Like, oh, I have to now dedicate and devote my time and life. It's not all just about me anymore, or me and my partner anymore. Like it's also about this kid that's coming into the world. Like this kid is dependent on me, relying on me. Like, oh my God. And some men, they cannot deal with that. I actually had a brother who, and I don't want to assume exactly what the reasons were because I don't know, but 2 days away from his child giving birth, he committed suicide. And I can only, and I know I've got other brothers that as they had kids, they went through a deep depression and started getting suicidal thoughts and things like that. So there's a big something gets rattled in our ego, in our identity at that time. The same way from, let's say, man to elder. Well, you got to now begin to deal with the fact that you're going to die and death is coming sooner than later. And that can be really scary for some people. So people going through a crisis of the identity at that time. I see all of these as opportunities to go to lean into the mystery of an initiation, to essentially redefine who you are and why you're here. And that shifts and changes over time. And through that, we call it an ego evolution. It's the evolution of the ego. It's like your identity, who you are and why you're here. It's a pyramid structure. And let's say this is the one of an inner boy. So your younger childlike identity for why you're here. And then that then evolves into your adolescence. Then that then evolves into your adult man. Then that evolves into your father if you go through the path of fatherhood. That evolves into elder in the path of elderhood. And it's just these structures that are building on top of each other and evolving on top of each other. Very similar, I used this example recently in a post. There's a city in Lebanon called Byblos. And if you dig deep in the city of Byblos, it has 8,000 years of history. And each layer of history shows you a different timeline of a different culture and different civilization. And what you can see is all these different civilizations have just built on top of each other. Okay? So that's very much what we're doing. Only with a mini collective society culture, it has its own identity, it has its own ethos. It has its own reasons for who we are and why we are here as a group. That happens on an individual level as well, and that's what the ego is. And we build layers on top of that structure. What some spiritual people do, and again, I'm not trying to say that what I think is right and what they think is wrong. I'm just sharing what my perspective is on this stuff. But what some people that relate to the ego in a way where it's about trying to battle it or destroy it or ego death, then that's the outcome that we're looking for. It's almost like a cultural genocide. It's like, let's just fucking wipe out this whole memory of who we are and why we're here, or wipe out the memory of these people. Very much what's happening in Gaza now. Just wipe it out. Completely destroy the memory of it. Destroy all the museums. Destroy all the records of all the births and all the people that were here. Destroy all the religious sites. Destroy this. Just get rid of everything. And I think a lot of people may be unknowingly approaching their healing process in that way. And I think the shadow side of that is, well, there must be so much contempt of that identity, so much so for them to just rid it completely, where it's actually, it could serve as a foundation of a less mature identity to then build on top of, whilst honoring and appreciating, hey, what it gave you and how far it took you now in your life. Very much how we can appreciate our Bronze Age ancestors. Hey, thanks for building the wheel. Great. You're part of our collective memory. All right, cool. You guys believed in some gnarly shit. You guys did child sacrifice and I think you guys were cannibals. All right, cool. But we can honor and appreciate how far you got us for then us to build another layer on top of that. How does that land for you, bro?
Before we continue, I want to share something that has genuinely transformed my life. Now, I've spent years studying psychology and interviewing expert guests, but I've never found anything as effective as the DeMartini method. Now, most frameworks just teach you how to manage your feelings, but this is specialized in dissolving the heavy emotional charges that keep you stuck. It's about stripping away the baggage, the resentment, the heartbreak, the anger, so you can actually reclaim your life and move forward with clarity and inspiration. Mitchell Vickridge at Nirvana Health is a specialist in this process. He has created a specialized product that simplifies the DeMartini method so you can apply it to yourself and start regaining control immediately. For those who want to go deeper, he also offers professional one-on-one coaching and facilitation. If you want to stop being held hostage by your past and start mastering it, go check out the link in the show notes to get 10% off all his services and products. It's the most powerful tool I've ever used to empower all areas of my life. Thank you, and let's get back to the show. That's a cool metaphor. I like it. I think it's super fascinating. This whole concept of, I've interviewed a lot of people who are coaches in this work. I've researched a lot of things. I've done a degree in psychology, and there's just so many ways to approach it. And I think a lot of people feel this just general tension inside that life isn't giving them what they deserve. There's more. There's got to be something more in this world, and they don't know how to get there. And I think there's so many different avenues to get there. We could list off 100 different things that are in this world. What do you think someone should do if they're feeling that they're feeling like out of alignment? They just have this general feeling that their life that they're living, there has to be something more. Where do they go with that?
The way that I would approach something like that is for people to reflect on where it is that they are out of integrity or out of alignment. Like, get a bit more specific and clear with how misalignment and out of integrity or inauthenticity is showing up for them. What areas of their life? And we could kind of put it into like certain categories of relationship, career, mission, your relationship with your family, how you feel in your body, and then within there, just starting to identify more clearer areas where that misalignment, inauthenticity is showing up. Let's say in relationship, okay, I'm saying I'm saying yes too much to my partner. I'm not expressing boundaries, or my sex life is shit. Like, I'm getting erectile dysfunction. I'm feeling shut off, or my ability to listen and have a conversation and be empathetic and understanding is very limited. Like, my partner is just sharing that with me and giving me that feedback that when she shares her perspective on something, my immediate response is to get defensive. And like, just really getting clear and just owning all the different ways in which this misalignment and inauthenticity is showing up in your life. And then with that, it may seem like a lot of stuff there for people to be confronted with at first, but this is where you just have to be really honest with yourself. From there, from a shadow work perspective, the intention would be to look at what the underpinnings of that pattern is. Okay, let's say it's the part of you that's he just struggles to be empathetic and just listen, and he gets defensive when someone's sharing a perspective. Like, cool, let's work on that. Let's actually start to go deeper into that. And from there, the intention would be to bring a deeper awareness into that pattern and why it's happening and where it's coming from within yourself as a person. And it could uncover something like, well, because you have a part of you that's really sensitive to criticism. And that part of your shadow believes that being criticized is going to lead to being abandoned. So there's a lot of work that you do to try and uphold this image that you're not wrong because you don't want to be abandoned. Okay, you have to own that you do that. that you have a part of you that does that. You need to bring awareness that you do that, because that's the first step to changing anything, is acknowledging it. You need to acknowledge it, that you're doing that. Okay, then we can start to get a bit deeper, like we said before, about getting more to the root of where that stems from. Okay, well, because whenever you were wrong about anything when you were younger, you got punished for it because you had a hypercritical, tyrannical mother that was just breathing down your neck and overly fixating on your flaws and criticizing you so much, and didn't provide you just with a warm, nurturing space or energy for you to kind of express these more vulnerabilities without, or mistakes, without being so harshly judged, and it led to a lot of pain that you experienced. So it's understandable. Cool, that's where it comes from. Okay, so building that awareness too of how it links to your history and your past. But then it's like, cool, all right, well, that's just repeating, and you're projecting your mother now on your partner, and your partner's not actually doing that. Okay, she's being critical. She's kind of mirroring back areas where you're not being in integrity, or where you have avoided taking responsibility. Cool, but she's actually not your big mother who's gonna abandon you and so critical of you, and you're not a little boy anymore. Like, that's not the reality that you're in right now. That's just something that your shadow has been projecting onto your partner now. You need to take responsibility for that. Okay. Then it's like, okay, well, what does taking responsibility look like for you? All right, well, you got to learn how to feel. You have to learn how to become more regulated in those moments where someone is offering you some feedback on something, how to actually feel more grounded in your body. So you're going to have to do more resource of safety work outside of those situations. So you actually learn what it feels like to feel calm and regulated. This could be somatic techniques. I mean, I teach this sort of stuff even in my shadow work practice. There's so many different tools and techniques out there for people to use to actually build more of a resource of safety, like actually learn what it feels like to feel safe and grounded in your body. But then it's actually integrating and applying that in real life situations when you're there having a challenging conversation. Okay, how can I bring in more of that resource of safety when I'm having that conversation, and just learning how to have a conversation with your partner. Like, fair enough, you probably didn't learn how to have that when you were younger. All right, it wasn't mirrored to you, modeled to you by your parents. You didn't see them having it with each other. You didn't see them engaging in it with you. But that's something that you're going to have to learn if you want to break that cycle and not just repeat the pattern and then push your partner away so much because they get so exhausted in just trying to offer you an opportunity to inviting you to step into a greater version of yourself instead of you getting so defensive and deflective. So then it's actually applying that in that conversation, learning how to navigate that conversation, learning communication techniques. So for me, it's very specific. And I think that when someone goes through all this list of different ways in which they're showing up in a disempowering, misaligned way in their life, and they essentially work through it in this way where they're getting to the root, they're building a psychological awareness of it. With that, they're tapping into the somatic component of it as well, where they're connecting to where their body feels unsafe. It could be rage, anger, terror, fear, collapse, freeze, whatever it is, and actually bringing in a safe, grounded energy into their own space, into their own bodies. So there's like a somatic component to it as well. There's also like an actual behavioral component to it as well, because that's what cements the wisdom that they're gaining and the awareness that they're gaining from these sort of insightful deep dives and discovery into their life. So their life is actually getting better. You know, this isn't just about building awareness. There's so many people that have so much awareness of their traumas, their past, their patterns, yet how they actually embody that and bring that awareness into their life, there's still a massive misalignment there. So these people are still kind of stuck in the overly intellectualizing things, very much in the mind. So there's an actual like integration of that wisdom in their life in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but there's shifts, there's changes. There's, oh my God, I'm speaking better. Or, oh my God, I'm not getting so defensive anymore. Cool, that's what we want to see. We actually want to see people's lives getting better. And also, I would say there's like a spiritual component to it as well, intertwined with it too, with that whole uh, experience. It is almost like a deeper connection to something greater than oneself throughout these experiences. Call it God, spirit. Um, so that's what I would say. Yeah,
Yeah, I often find the relationship that I have to myself, it just transfers to all areas. Like that, once you hit one domino, like it transfers to all areas of your life, your relationship, business, health, fitness. Like for me, it was definitely like this sort of anxious attachment and disposition. And when I started to work on that, like I could see the compounding effect in all areas of your life. So it does take a bit of the pressure away in the sense that like when you work on yourself, like it is going to transfer into your work, your relationships, your health, your fitness, because it's how you filter your experience of life. Like you said, the ego, it's like how you differentiate between the external world and the internal world. So it's like you change the programming, of course, it's going to show up in every single domain of life.
big time. Yeah, amen to that, brother. And credit to you for doing that. I know me working on my relationship with money or women or purpose. It just showed up in just how I carried myself in so many other areas of life. So it definitely it has a ripple effect everywhere. So invitation here is for everyone just to lean in, start working on something. It can be a bit overwhelming for you to look at everything that's there if you write it all down on a piece of paper. Um, but there's like a lightening of the load of the burden. It's like, okay, we're all carrying these rocks on our shoulders, things that were passed down to us or things that we carried as a way to adapt to the circumstances that we're in. Great, okay, understandable. But like as you go through that process of unburdening these programs and patterns, and each time being disillusioned to where, oh my god, I thought that was true, but it's totally not, and that's just what I believe. And redefining your sense of self and your ego, just like evolving through that and integrating all these other parts of you throughout that, becoming more whole. There is a lightness that happens over time with that, because you're just not carrying so much from the past into your future.
Yeah. What uncomfortable truth do most men avoid about themselves?
What uncomfortable truth do most men avoid about themselves? Hmm. Well, I've got a few. One is that there's a fear of the feminine, fear of women. I'd say that's an uncomfortable truth that's there, and I think that the way that fear shows up can be, becoming hyper masculine and tough, and um, it can show up in becoming being the nice guy, the avoidant, bending over backwards nice guy. Um, just fear of intimacy, like true intimacy, performance anxiety, um, commitment issues. I think that that's there. That's definitely there. I know I still have that to a degree. I think it's like, if we look at it from like a spiritual perspective, the feminine is just like the all-consuming nature. We go out on a boat and we're sailing into the ocean. It's just like, all right, fuck, we're just we're just surrendering to the elements over here. This all-consuming feminine nature, unpredictable nature of it's just all. There's something I think so ingrained in us as men that have like faced nature to conquer nature. Um, but at the same time, that coming from this place of fear of it because of how we've had to survive in the face of it, and I think that somehow reflects with our relationship with the feminine in general. Whether like I said, we're avoidant and shut down and purposeless and aimless in the face of nature, or overly conquering and destructive and colonizing, in the face of it. So I think that's probably there somewhere in the masculine psyche.
Hmm. And I think especially like the cognitive dissonance that arises whenever you do have thoughts or feelings about potentially being scared or weak or not feeling strong because of the belief that you have to be strong as well. Like there's this real tension between what you think you ought to do and what you actually are experiencing, and there's this tension, and it's easier to just suppress the emotion than confront what part of you you need to learn from, like what part of you is expressing that, and it's quite difficult. Do you think doing the inner work is easier for women, or because of that social conditioning around suppressing emotions?
Um, maybe, maybe it could be easier for women. Um, I mean, look, there's no doubt that programming, uh, is there. It definitely is there, and it would definitely be inhibiting a lot of men from leaning into this work. And but I think once men get into it, like I think they do really well once they actually just get into it. Yeah, I think that they are very capable, and yeah, I think men can do it. Like I actually enjoy working with men a lot. I find them quite easy to work with. Not saying I find women hard. I work with a lot of women. I think majority of the people I've worked with in my um, over my career has been women. So, but men, yeah.
Give us some insight into women, because it'd be super fascinating to learn more about how they present and how they show their patterns, or how they do the inner work in comparison to men.
How women do the work in comparison to men. Hmm. You know what, bro? I actually don't like. I think collectively, women, as on a percentage level, have different types of collective shadows compared to men, and then there's a crossover, and then both men and women have many men and women have both of the same, shadows and patterns that manifest too. Um, but in terms of how like it is working with both men and women, I don't see much difference, honestly. I don't see much difference in working with men and women. I see there's a difference in how I need to work with women at times, because I understand that I'm a man. And for many women, it may be their first time working with a man. And I understand that I can come across in some people's eyes as being quite a masculine man, and that can be quite intimidating for some people, especially women, especially if they have some kind of wounding around men. But I've also seen the same thing with men that have had wounding with men, and therefore they get intimidated by being around even me, being a masculine man. So I see an equal level of responsibility that I need to take with working with both people, depending on what their history um, is like. And I'm sure the same thing would be for a woman. I've done workshops where there's been women in the space. There've been, both men and women working in the space of a workshop. And I've had men openly share that they feel more unsafe, that there's women around. They feel more emotionally unsafe. So I'm sure that women also, coaches and facilitators may also have that thing to navigate when they're working with women, with men. So I see both now. Yeah. Look, it's hard to say. It really depends on the woman. If you have a woman that is very much gone through her own wounding with men specifically, like that story and narrative is very much present there, that's something I need to be quite delicate around when I'm working with, and just understanding and very
Mm.
empathetic, and really hold that, because with her working with me, I can be potentially the first, and I've had many women say this to me, the first safe man that they've ever met, that they've ever connected with, that they've ever revealed these parts of themselves to. So with that just comes like a big responsibility to, hold that and help facilitate an experience like that. But at the same time, I've had that with men too, so it's everyone's the same, man. Honestly, I don't. I don't get too caught up in women have this stuff, men have this stuff. I know I might create some content that might be exclusive to like men, women, this. But I just make content like that because it just speaks to people that are in that experience a bit more. It's a bit more, it cuts straight to that like experience and makes it a bit more, makes them feel more seen. But across the board, both men and women have, more or less the exact same shadows and patterns that they experience. Yeah.
Why do you think women got so triggered by your content about what men who have done the work found attractive / unattractive in women?
Well, I think the first thing is because I was a man saying it. I think that's the first thing. I think because I was a man saying it, and I think with that, from the trauma lens, it gets filtered through. Here's another man telling us how to be. Here's another man trying to, tell us what box to be put into. Here's another man telling us what's not good enough about ourselves. So I think that's that's one of the big things. Another thing is that I think a lot of women felt unseen in a sense where those unattractive patterns. This is from what I heard, and I don't necessarily agree with this fully, but I can understand it, that those patterns or the behavior that I was saying is unattractive, they were saying how it's as a result of wounding from men throughout history under patriarchal systems of oppression and power. Okay? So, makes sense. I get it from a collective, intergenerational perspective. I fully understand that. That a woman who, let's say, who comes from a line of women that, let's say, have gone through lots of oppressive, masculine, patriarchal systems. The woman that gets birthed on the other side from that now, even though, the world isn't perfect now, and I know that women are more likely to be killed by a man than a man is more likely to be killed by a woman, and there's genuine, safety concerns that women have with that, and I get that. I understand what it's like. Even as a little boy walking with my mother and sisters, and like I said, creepy men looking and following and shit like that. Like, I fully get it. I know it's real. I'm not oblivious to that shit. I can understand that would create a really thick, dense defensive structure in the face of men that would, elicit like a higher chance of these sort of patterns or behavior being outwardly expressed. Like, I get that. I fully understand that, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it okay, and that still doesn't make it attractive when my post is framed when they don't take accountability and responsibility for it. So I could engage in a relationship, or I'm starting to date someone or exploring some kind of connection with a woman, and she could come in with her own wounding with the masculine. Okay, fair enough. I get it. No one's perfect. I'm going to be going in with my own stuff as well, right? With things that I may not even be aware of too. But if she was to project this sort of wounded, dysfunctional type behavior at me, and I was to go, hey, that's not cool. Like, I get that, you were hurt by your father or a past partner before, but you're actually projecting that onto me now, and I'm not that guy. And, I'd appreciate it if you took responsibility for that, and we communicated in a more healthy manner next time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, just inviting just accountability. If she wasn't to take that and be accountable for it and take responsibility for it, and then essentially use patriarchal masculine oppression over women as a justification for that behavior to not take responsibility and accountability for it, that makes it even more unattractive. Okay? It's not that women, or anyone for that matter, can't have any type of wounding from whatever reason it may be. Let's say if it's from men. It's if now she's in a dynamic where I'm not that guy. I'm a safe man. I'm willing to listen and learn and hold space at capacity. I'm willing to support her through her own process that she's going through. But most importantly, I'm not going to lose myself in that, and I'm going to stay rooted in who I am, and I have my own standards, and I'm going to reflect a mirror and go, hey, this is where you're showing up in a dysfunctional way, and it's actually not. It's not healthy the way that you're communicating with me or showing up or whatever it is, and she doesn't take responsibility for that. Hey, that's it. For me. That's just little girl behavior, inserting whatever past trauma story that apparently now I as a man have to tiptoe around or excuse to justify the behavior, which makes it even more unattractive in my eyes. It would be like a man. It would be ridiculous to suggest for a woman to accept that kind of behavior from a man. That a man has been wounded by his mother, and there are many men that have been wounded by their mothers. Many, many, many men that have been wounded by their mothers. Okay? It would be ridiculous, or not just mothers, but other women through their past. Let's say they were manipulated. There are many men that have been manipulated by past partners, and their lives have been completely destroyed in some way, just like there are many women whose lives have been destroyed from dysfunctional, tyrannical men. Both exist. And if someone is stepping into this conversation ignorant to both of those realities, not to minimize the other person's or other side's experience, but just to acknowledge it, well then, it would make the I think it would bring in a lot more understanding if both of those were acknowledged. It would be ridiculous to suggest that some man who's been wounded by women gets away with dysfunctional male behavior to a woman and doesn't take responsibility for it, doesn't take accountability for it in the face of a relatively safe and healthy woman who's inviting his growth and sees his potential. It would be ridiculous to use that justification and argument with him. So I think that's where the disagreement was, and why, quote unquote, so many women got triggered over that post.
Mm. Do you think healing is being too gendered? Because in one hand, it's like the relationship to mother and father and masculine and feminine have a massive impact, but it's also, I feel like, created this opportunity just to blame men in their lives for having this wounding as well, vice versa for men blaming women or the feminine. Like there's just feels like it's opened up a can of worms to either to divide, if you know what I mean. Like it's just creating, even though it's like if you just worked on yourself by default, you're going to show up with healthier versions of your both energies. But I also feel like it's created now, it's like, oh, there's this piece of information I have, and now I can use it to blame. It's like it's become a label. So how do you find that dance between, healing and what is worth like being aware of with the genders, or like more specifically masculine and feminine energy versus not over identifying too much with it?
I think on a personal level, that would be my approach for sure. I don't bring in masculine, feminine energy work into my work. Like when I'm working with clients, I personally don't bring it in. I don't bring in, I'd say that's where I'll leave that. But, I do think that there is a male and a female consciousness that exists, and with that there's almost like a collective identity that both sexes have sort of adopted from society before us, that's given each sex a blueprint of, hey, this is what you do, this is how you act, and this is who you are. And I think a lot of that is super outdated. I think there's a lot of beautiful parts to it too, but I think there's an opportunity for evolution in that. And I think there are still remnants of the dysfunctional side of both of those identities that exist within, the male and the female consciousness that are still occurring now in some degree, that are still subject to conversation and need to be addressed in some way. And I think with that, it offers an invitation for people to look at themselves and say, like, okay, cool, do I have that part of me there? Do I have that shadow that does that? Why do I have that shadow that does that? Okay, I have that shadow that does that because of X, Y, Z reason. Okay, I want to take responsibility for that so I don't bring that into my own personal relationship for what it means to be a man, for how I show up in the world as a man, And I think the feminine has, women have been, they've had an opportunity to be able to share, like, hey, this is what's been happening to us. This is why it's been happening. And I think that has been an opportunity for growth for some men, as it will be for the same degree to reflect back like dysfunctional female behavior and how there's an opportunity for women to work on themselves in that way, whether men or women are in homosexual or heterosexual relationships. It's really besides the point. But I think with that same conversation, there's an opportunity to look at where within ourselves are we just perpetuating that same story and projecting it onto others that don't deserve it. And I think that's where it can get a little bit tricky, because the trauma lens, it's hard to distinguish who's safe and who's not safe. It's like we're projecting like what's not safe onto people that are safe. And I think that's when, and I think that's still going to happen a lot, because there are still a lot of people carrying those wounds, obviously. I think basically what I'm trying to say is the identity of what it means to be a man, the identity of what it means to be a woman, it's really diversifying a lot more now. It's becoming a lot more multidimensional. There's a lot more range that's being explored and integrated into those identities. And I think, it may have been quite one-dimensional before. And I think this whole conversation of man, women, and masculine, feminine, it's really creating an opportunity for redefining, what that is. In terms of it being like a divisive topic, I get it, but I don't know. I'm not really sure how to answer that part there. That was part of your question, huh? So divisive, right?
There's a lot of stuff with healing stuff that's divisive. I think a lot of people carry a lot of wounds, and there's a lot of people who say a lot of things on the internet, and it's quite triggering for people. Do you find through your experience, like, what's the difference between how men and women navigate their triggers? Like, I feel like with men, anger is often used as like a form of control, right? But for women, is it more like do you find they fall into more of the good girl submissive type? Is that
Not necessarily. No. But both men and women can embody both. I work with a lot of nice guys. Nice guys don't get angry. They'll build up resentment, and the anger will come out at some other time, and then they'll feel deeply ashamed of it. Then they'll suppress it for quite some time. But for the most part, anger isn't their go-to way of dealing with triggers. It's fawning, it's shutting down, freezing. It's saying yes. You could have a good. There's good boy and good girl archetype, and both men and women can embody both. Now, in terms of anger, you can have both men and women that express anger. They both have an uninitiated warrior. They both have an uninitiated warrior, and so it's more of an what's the most alive, active online archetype within them that defends them with triggers, rather than are you a man or a woman. I think historically there's probably been more permission for each sex to embody which archetype, but I think that's changed a lot, especially if you're living in Australia. I say this as someone who doesn't know the statistics of exactly how many women there are still embodying good girl and how many men there are still embodying uninitiated warrior. I don't know the numbers, but just from my experience, I've worked with lots of angry women, and I've worked with lots of nice guys, and I've worked with lots of good girls, and I've worked with lots of uninitiated warrior men. I've worked with both, and I can't say, it's exclusive to one gender.
And where does that anger mostly stem from in both men and women?
Just unprocessed rage, something that's happened. Rage is generally what covers grief, so it's really unprocessed grief. They haven't grieved something. There's unresolved grief that's there, from their past, that still lives inside of them, and they haven't. Rage release ceremonies. It's not a common practice in our culture. They are processes that I facilitate, rage release ceremonies. Part of my shadow work. Once we really touch on a rage that's being stored in the body somewhere, I'll take someone through a process where they release it. And for a lot of people, there's just rage. Rage, it could be because they were oppressed when they were younger, or they were deceived, or they were abandoned. Or they're still psychologically enmeshed with a parental figure and they haven't untangled from that. There's that's where I'd say a lot of that anger comes from. The anger. Yeah.
Do you think that that's obviously as a byproduct of the environment that they were raised in?
Big time, yeah. And it could be still as a result of the environment they're still in. So for some people, they may not feel safe yet to really let go of the anger, because anger is what protects them. Anger used to protect me a lot. I went to anger management at school. My nickname at school was Aggro. That was one of them. Big Nose was my other one. But aggro was one of them. So I was a pretty angry teenager. I used anger a lot growing up. Yeah, that was my sort of go-to thing. But I know where that comes from. My father wasn't there to protect my family. I had to be the protector for women. I had to protect. What can I use to repel off creepy men, or in the environment I'm in where people carry knives and they'll rob you, and if you look weak, you get targeted. Look like an angry cunt. Just be an angry cunt. Frown, like just embody that energy. And it happened unconsciously. I wasn't even consciously aware that I was like doing it, but it just became my persona, became my identity. And I didn't feel safe in that environment to let go of that anger. And I'd say for a lot of people, they just don't feel safe yet. And just going back to, the hierarchy of needs, I think, some people are just genuinely living still in unsafe environments. Like if you're a woman still living in an environment where there's just shitloads of ungrounded, unsafe men, well, it's understandable why you still value anger. Why it's still very hard for you to distinguish a safe man from an unsafe man, and where majority of men are just unsafe. I get it. I fully understand. I empathize with that so much. Which is why I'm not some fucking masculine and feminine life coach dude that's like, oh, women just need to surrender in their feminine energy, and then they're fucking no. Like there's actually creepy cunts out there, you know what I mean? I'm not going to try and tell women to like. The way that I see my work with shadow integration is you're integrating every single part of you. Every single part of you has a role. It's like you're a conductor and every single part of you is a musician in an orchestra, and they each have a sacred role. Even your angry, protective part, even your nice guy, even your this, even your that, they've all had a role in bringing you where you are right now in your life. And it would be ridiculous to suggest that someone should just wipe it all clean and just delete every single one of them. Like there may come a time in my life where being angry serves me. Actually, many times in my life, being angry serves me. There was a guy that pulled a knife on me outside my mum's house. It was actually only a few months ago. He was a junkie. He's clearly someone who's lives in addiction, probably with ice. It actually served me at that time to get angry to a degree, you know, as he was there, because my mother was there, and I needed to create some kind of energy and a boundary there to not just protect myself, but my mother as well. So, there comes a time where these parts of us, when they're initiated into not just operating in their role in a way where they're just projecting out everywhere and they're just projecting it onto people where, it's not necessary to, where everyone and everything becomes a threat. That's like an uninitiated role. That's like a wounded, they're in a wounded role. They're just like a dog in a corner, just like raging it at everyone, But, once these protective parts of us can really slot themselves in a role that's more suitable to them now, or they can at least just chill and kick back and then come out when it's necessary for them to come out, I think that's when we become a lot more whole and integrated. So, yeah, a lot, like just going back, a lot of the women that have suffered from a lot of this sort of wounding, the work that I do is actually encouraging them to own those parts of them that have showed up in dysfunctional ways, but just having more leadership around them and more, that starts with acknowledgement and accountability, but more leadership so they can actually use them in more empowering ways when it serves them. Yeah, when it serves them.
Yeah, because I think the end goal is just to have flexibility with all parts of yourself, because or else they're there for a reason. These parts of our psyche wouldn't exist if they didn't serve a role, and it's just we disown them because we to adapt to our environment, and then we sort of encounter the opposite side of the struggle because we've disowned that part. It is a fascinating dance that we face with life, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. Any concluding thoughts around, healing, shadow stuff? I mean, there's always more we can go into, but anything you think we could wrap up the conversation with?
Yeah, just going back to like how healing can be sometimes seen as like a never-ending process. Uh, I'd invite people to kind of reframe that, whereas individuation is a lifelong, never-ending process. Becoming who you are is a lifelong, never-ending process, and I think there's something really beautiful and exciting about that. It's like you're a flower that's constantly blooming. So see your journey as something like that. It's like you're not like always an unfinished, broken piece of faulty equipment that needs to be fixed, and you're approaching your healing as a way for you to reach some place of enlightenment or peak fixed experience, for then you to finally be able to live in bliss and love your life fully. I think just in learning how to enjoy life and seeing individuation as a part of the dance and continuing to become who you are throughout that, giving yourself permission to be redefined as you go through these rites of passage and these initiations throughout life too, and seeing all these challenges that we go through in life and what it brings up as an opportunity to go through that process. So staying curious throughout that as well. So healing is a part of individuation, but it's not all of it. I think healing is just like the somatic process of bringing calm, safety, groundedness back to our nervous system when things do come up in our life that do challenge us. So we're remaining as light as possible and not being burdened by too many rocks carrying into our future. So just redefining the whole relationship with this process, so it doesn't because I think a lot of people get into that trap a bit with how they relate to it. And just obviously just want to thank you, Egan, for having me on here. It was a good conversation. You got me thinking, and it's actually been my first podcast in a while. So thanks for having me on, brother. And just asking me all the questions and supporting my work as well. Really appreciate you, bro. And to everyone who's listened, taking the time to listen, thank you for listening. For anyone who is interested in my work, I'll just give you all a bit of a rundown of where my life's sort of heading now. So I am available for online consultations. You can book them just if you go on my Instagram, go on my bio, you can book in a consultation that we can go through. I have mentorships, one-on-one mentorships, and I have courses, community courses and programs that you could do. So group containers to facilitate shadow integration work. So if you're interested in any of those, a consultation would be great. way to start. I'm releasing a shadow work practitioner training this year. So if you're a coach, facilitator, therapist that wants to enrich what it is that you're doing and just support your clients using more of, just implementing more shadow work in there too, that would be available for you to learn. Or if you're an aspiring coach and you want to learn just some tools and frameworks and how you can start coaching people, could be a really good start for you. I'm going to be doing an Australian tour, my 2026 Australian tour. That's going to be starting it's going to be starting in March. I'll be in Sydney, Melbourne, Byron, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, and possibly Perth and Adelaide.
Yeah, get around to Perth.
Yeah, I have to get down to Perth. It's a bit of a way away, but I'm sure we'll make it work. Come down to Perth. I got a retreat in the Hunter Valley, New South Wales, March 27th to the 29th. And then after all that, I'll essentially be going to Europe to do a European tour. So looking forward to meeting everyone in Europe. So that's it from me.
Awesome. Charles, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Egan. Love you, brother.
Thank you for listening to the episode. I hope you got a ton of value out of our guest today. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to click the follow button on Spotify and also click the 3 dots and click rate show. Makes a massive difference in helping grow the show and bring on even bigger guests. And also, if you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It does make a massive difference. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.